Amazing turnaround. Millionaire discovers employees' hidden strength after humiliating blind date. Jonathan Hayes, CEO of Hayes Tech Solutions, strolled through the sleek, open office space, exuding confidence, prosperity, and an air of quiet superiority. His roughly tailored suit brushed against the polished floors, a daily reminder of the empire he had built. Yet little did he know, the real treasure of his success lay not within him, but among his employees, hiding in plain sight. He had always let his wealth and intellect define him, clinging to the notion that only those with power could wield true influence. But an unexpected blind date, orchestrated by his well-meaning mother, would soon rattle his unshakable facade. The evening unfolded like a poorly scripted romantic comedy. The date turned out to be a setup, an uncomfortable dinner with a woman he barely knew, who seemingly had been briefed on every embarrassing detail of his life. When he discovered that Sarah, his overlooked administrative assistant, had been behind it all, indignation stirred in him. How had he underestimated her? How had he denied the talents of someone capable enough to engineer such an embarrassment? As he returned to his office, discontent coiled tight within him, igniting simmering anger towards both Sarah and himself. What kind of leader was he, blind to the assets right under his nose? Navigating between self-loathing and fury, Jonathan felt the walls of his luxurious office closing in. His mind raced, warring thoughts colliding. Could he admit his arrogance? The disillusionment with his own superiority left him grappling with vulnerability, something he had avoided for years. He watched Sarah as she typed away, her quiet demeanor masking potential he had failed to recognize. She wasn't merely an administrative cog. His tension mounted with every interaction, a mixture of regret brewing quietly just beneath the surface. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With each passing week, Jonathan's self-examination became harder to ignore. Sarah's quiet mastery of technology intrigued him more than he cared to admit. Frustration bubbled within him, a discontentment with how he had treated people in his quest for success. Those doubting glances she cast his way burned into his consciousness, making clear that he could no longer coast on past glories. In the break room, during a small confrontation over a corporate issue, he felt his resentment spill forth. Her determination met his guarded arrogance, and he wrestled with whether to confront the truth. Could he embrace her strengths as his own? Jonathan's mind twisted in knots as looming deadlines and impending sabotage created a potent cocktail of doubt and anger. Every corner of his meticulously crafted life began to feel teetering, as though he stood on a precipice, staring down into a chasm of potential failure. And as he and Sarah prepared to tackle the website overhaul that loomed over the company like a dark cloud, he realized the gravity of their situation. In the tension-charged air of the office, Jonathan hesitated, bearing the crushing weight of the choice he faced. Could he risk exposure, risk it all by admitting he needed her? And would that open the door to her potential, or unleash repercussions he wasn't ready to confront? The real challenge lay ahead, and just as he began to sort through the chaos, a revelation loomed larger than life, hinting at the transformation that awaited them both. Jonathan stood at the edge of decision, his heart pounding against his chest, each beat echoing the truth he so desperately wanted to ignore. He gazed through the glass wall of his office, where Sarah was engaged in a whirlwind of activity, seamlessly guiding the team through the planned overhaul of the company website. It was a contrast to the static image he had maintained for so long, an image built on control and dominance. Here, she was not just an employee, she was a force of nature. As he returned to his desk, Jonathan's thoughts raced. He felt the walls of his luxurious office pressing in on him, a stark reminder that everything he had built could crumble at the hands of his own ignorance. The prospect of acknowledging Sarah's capabilities gnawed at his insides, generating an uncomfortable mix of fear and intrigue. Why had he built such a barrier between them? He had always prized his position as a leader above all else, but now it seemed like a gilded cage, confining both himself and the people he led. The more Jonathan observed her, the more he was forced to acknowledge a painful truth. Sarah's potential had remained unrecognized not by her, but by him. He had equated leadership with superiority, but in his quest to maintain that facade, he had ignored the power of collaboration, the very foundation that could elevate his company to new heights. Yet the thought of openly embracing a partnership with Sarah was fraught with danger. What if he opened the door to her talents only to have her overshadow him? The instinct to maintain his status gnawed at him like a persistent parasite. Tension coiled in the air around Jonathan as he finally made his way towards Sarah's work area. Each step felt like a trek into unknown territory. The thought of her reaction to his newfound acknowledgement of her talents sent waves of unease crashing over him. Would she see it as weakness? As he approached, Jonathan could see her fully immersed in her role. The dexterity with which she navigated complex queries, the ease with which she interacted with the team, she was a leader in her own right. "Sarah," he called out, his voice steadier than he felt inside. She turned, meeting his gaze with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. He hesitated. The words he had rehearsed in his mind felt like flimsy pieces of paper in the face of the actual confrontation. "I need your help with the website overhaul," he finally managed to say, a small crack in the wall he had built around himself. The look on her face was inscrutable, a flash of surprise, then a flicker of something else. Was it hope? "What do you have in mind?" she responded, her tone laced with an edge of professionalism that urged him to dig deeper. "Your insights on streamlining our processes would be invaluable. I've realized I can't do this alone anymore." The truth hung in the air, raw and unrefined. As he spoke, he wrestled with his vulnerability, pushing against the instinct to reclaim his facade of control. For a moment, an electric silence enveloped them, the weight of his admission pressing down between them. Then, she nodded slowly, a subtle smile playing on her lips. "I can help with that. Let us discuss how to structure our approach better." Jonathan felt a rush of something. He anticipated trust. It was a fragile thing but promising, a small ember in the midst of his raging inferno of self-doubt. As they began to strategize, he saw the spark in her eyes and realized that, perhaps, this new partnership would not mean his diminishing stature, but an evolution of their shared goals. In this moment of convergence, Jonathan comprehended a newfound sense of direction. Yet as the discussion progressed, an unforeseen ripple of tension emerged, an unsettling realization that Sarah was not just a colleague, but potentially a rival in success. The prospect of navigating what lay ahead filled him with anxiety. Would this partnership truly lead to growth for both of them, or would it force him to confront the deeper insecurities that had long since festered within? As the meeting adjourned, Jonathan felt the heaviness remain a specter of uncertainty, shadowing the possibilities of their collaboration. He knew the time had come to confront not only his past but the possibility of a powerful new future. Little did he know, impending challenges awaited them, including a revelation that would test the newly forged alliance, a direct confrontation with an unseen adversary lurking within the company's ranks, intent on sabotage. The moment of truth was drawing near, and the stakes had never been higher. Jonathan sat at his desk, the vibrant chatter of the team filling the air like an electric charge. His thoughts were a tempest, swirling around the confrontation with Sarah that had transpired just hours ago. The realization had opened a floodgate of emotions he thought he had fully contained. There was fear, yes, but along with that came an unsettling excitement. It no longer felt like a battle for dominance. Instead, it felt like a step into a partnership that could redefine his vision of leadership. His fingers tapped nervously on the polished surface of his desk as he mulled over strategies to integrate Sarah's ideas into the project. In the past, he had always perceived collaboration as a potential threat, a dilution of his authority. Yet now, something monumental was shifting within him. Embracing her insights instead of resisting them seemed to hint at a future filled with possibilities instead of pitfalls. "Think bigger," he muttered to himself, recalling the way Sarah's eyes had sparkled with promise when discussing the website overhaul. The collaborative energy between them sparked something deep inside him, a growing hunger to foster that creativity and, in many ways, an acknowledgement of his own shortcomings. Leadership was not about being the loudest voice in the room, but rather the one who ensures that every voice is heard, each contribution valued. Determined, he redirected his attention to the company assets, pulling up data on the website usage. Jonathan's analytical mind craved metrics, a language he was fluent in. Nevertheless, numbers alone couldn't replace intuition or the robust discussions he craved with Sarah. Just as he started drafting a list of targets, a reminder pinged in the corner of his mind. He had to invite Sarah into this process more personally. After a few moments of reflection, Jonathan stood abruptly, almost scaring his assistant seated outside his office. "I need Sarah. Now." A short while later, Sarah arrived at his door, a notepad clutched tightly in her hand. "What's up?" she asked, her brow slightly furrowed with curiosity. Jonathan cleared his throat, sensing the gravity of the moment. "I want to set up a working session. Just you and me. Let us dig deeper into our strategy." Her expression shifted immediately. What had been cordial now brimmed with eagerness. He noted the shift in the dynamics between them and the burgeoning respect that was now palpable in the air. They needed each other, and as he opened the door wide, he felt as though he was not just inviting her in, but into a new definition of himself. Sitting side by side, they sifted through demographic data, user feedback, and design ideas. Sarah challenged Jonathan's previous assumptions, guiding him through a process of rediscovery. He could see her analytical mind at work, untangling complex problems with a grace that irked and intrigued him at the same time. With each suggestion, his initial unease began to dissolve, replaced by a realization that his previous fears of being overshadowed were unfounded. Working together wasn't threatening, it was liberating. Yet, as they embraced the momentum of this new collaboration, a shadow loomed, a persistent whisper lingering in the back of his mind. What if there were forces within the company that couldn't match the optimism he now felt? The dawning realization that his past influence was being undermined began to fester dangerously. "Jonathan," Sarah interrupted, pulling him from his thoughts, "you look like you've seen a ghost." "Everything okay? Just thinking about how much we have to gain," he replied, forcing a smile. But even as he said it, anxiety clawed at him. Change and vulnerability had never come easily to him, and now, with potential adversaries on the horizon, he felt the ground beneath them shifting in unpredictable ways. The tension thickened as they prepared to present their ideas to the larger team. Was it truly wise to expose themselves when jeopardizing power dynamics could lead to sabotage? With divisions within the company, Jonathan sensed their proposed collaboration would only incite jealousy and dissent among some. "Sarah, do you ever wonder if we're moving too fast?" he asked cautiously, unsure of how she'd take the question. As she met his gaze, a flicker of concern crossed her features before she steeled her resolve. "Only if we don't execute this right together." With that, a subtle yet undeniable tension settled between them. They were no longer just an executive and an employee. They were allies navigating a treacherous landscape, encumbered by external skepticism and internal challenges. A creeping sense of foreboding lingered, promising disruption on the horizon. Little did they know, a figure within their trusted circle was already plotting movements to undermine this very alliance, forcing Jonathan to question everything he knew about loyalty and ambition. The stakes were higher than he realized, and he wasn't ready for the storm that was about to erupt. Jonathan's heart raced at the thought. In this new reality, he would not just face external tensions, but a direct confrontation with potential annihilation from the insides, a burgeoning threat that would push him and Sarah to their limits as they defied those who would see them fail. Would they emerge victorious or scattered, victims of their own decisions? The answer lurked just beyond the next meeting, a brewing storm ready to break. The meeting was set for the following morning, and Jonathan could scarcely sleep. Thoughts raced through his mind, each one heavier than the last. As he stared at the ceiling in the dark, the outline of his previous self, the one who shunned collaboration, reared its head. But this time, he wouldn't let the phantom of his old ways haunt him. The office buzzed around him as he entered the sunlit room, hyper-aware of the anticipation swirling in the air. Sarah was at her desk, her face bathed in light as she worked on a presentation. The sight shocked him. It was not just the bright sunlight illuminating her determination, but the sheer depth of her commitment that radiated confidence. It was as if she were a candle, each flicker propelling him further into the resolve of their partnership. "Are you ready?" he asked, pacing deliberately toward her, the weight of the upcoming presentation like a leaden cloak on his shoulders. "Ready as I can be," she replied, glancing up with an encouraging smile that sparked something inside Jonathan. This was not just about the presentation. It was about what lay beyond the slides, the power dynamics shifting, and the territory yet uncharted. He swallowed hard. "Let us do this together, then." As they approached the conference room, Jonathan felt the familiar tremor of anxiety in his stomach. He couldn't ignore the swell of doubt. What if their peers dismissed their ideas? What if they were overshadowed by the naysayers hovering around every corner? They took their seats at the long conference table, filled with colleagues wearing expressions ranging from curiosity to indifference. Jonathan started to speak, but his voice faltered, the words hanging in the air. There were expectations of him as a leader, and he had always been so singularly focused on control. But with Sarah by his side, he suddenly realized he could evoke interaction, not just deliver. "Before I begin, I want to introduce you to someone," he said, nodding toward Sarah. "We've been working closely on a new strategy for our website and team outreach that I believe may change our trajectory." He watched as Sarah took a breath, her confidence igniting the room. She spoke passionately about their research, pulling the audience in with statistics and creative insights that painted a vivid picture of potential. Jonathan lit up internally, marveling at how she engaged not just with data, but with their shared vision, elevating their endeavor. The energy in the room shifted. He found himself effortlessly interjecting, building on Sarah's points, and seeing how they wove together a narrative neither could have constructed alone. It was a dance, fluid and invigorating, as they navigated questions and criticisms that emerged. But as the discussion flourished, Jonathan's heart raced with an impending sense of vulnerability. He was exposing not just their project, but a new part of himself, someone willing to cede the control he so desperately clung to before. Suddenly, a familiar figure spoke up: Evelyn, the head of marketing, well known for her sharp tongue and dismissive demeanor. "This approach seems far too ambitious. We can't afford risks like this right now." The words pierced through the budding momentum, and Jonathan's stomach sank. This was the internal threat he had dreaded. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Yet Jonathan took a breath, grounding himself. How could he respond not as a defensive leader, but as an advocate for collaboration? "Evelyn," he said steadily, "I respect your expertise, but I also believe great opportunities require calculated risks. What if we collaborate with the design team to refine our concepts further and mitigate those concerns?" A pause hung heavy in the air, and then an unexpected nod from Sarah provided him the reassurance he desperately needed. The silence broke, and colleagues began to murmur their support, rallying around the potential that lay before them. As they wrapped things up, Jonathan felt a swell of hope. For the first time, he could see beyond winning or losing. It was less about a battle of power and more about leading from a place of shared responsibility. But even as enthusiasm filled the room, a flicker of trepidation crept back into his mind. Had they truly gained a foothold, or would the animosity from Evelyn and others rise like a tide against them? Later that evening, Jonathan and Sarah met for coffee, both visibly exhilarated yet cautious. "We did it, didn't we?" Sarah exclaimed, her eyes a mix of joy and determination. "Yeah, but the challenges aren't over," he replied, his words heavy with unspoken thoughts. "Evelyn's just one player in a much larger game. We need to remain vigilant." The shadows of doubt overshadowing that excitement hinted at a larger confrontation on the horizon. Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that their small triumph was but a blip in an ongoing fight for validation and support. "Let us dig deeper into the dynamics at play," Sarah suggested, a light burning in her eyes. "We need to anticipate any sabotage ahead." Jonathan felt determined. The storm might be brewing, but together they would prepare their defenses. They planned their next moves. Jonathan's resolve solidified. This was no longer just about the project. It was about redefining his identity as a leader, forging stronger alliances, and confronting the forces that sought to undermine their progress. The challenges were mounting. The next bout was on the way, an inner battle as much as an external one. And as the clock ticked toward their next encounter, Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the verge of discovering just how far he might be willing to go. Jonathan stood at the intersection of uncertainty and newfound resolve. The meeting with Evelyn loomed in his mind like a dark cloud threatening to unleash a storm. He paced his small apartment that evening, tapping into every particle of energy bubbling inside him while fending off the familiar ghosts of self-doubt. What could he possibly do to ensure their success? A part of him recoiled at the thought of returning to the constraints of rigid leadership. He sought solace in his notebook, the familiar worn pages blanketed with half-formed ideas, musings about leadership, and reminders of his commitment to collaboration. As he flipped through them, he came across a note he'd written during a prior reflection. What if vulnerability is the truest form of strength? The words struck him again, deepening the roots of his introspection. To embrace insecurity was to pave the way for growth, not just for himself, but for his colleagues, too. The phone buzzed, pulling him momentarily from his thoughts. It was Sarah. Are you still up? We need to discuss our plan. Her voice crackled through the speaker, charged with the same infectious spirit he had witnessed in the conference room. Yeah, I was just thinking about how we can tackle Evelyn's points and get the buy-in we need, he responded, a hint of enthusiasm lighting up his voice. Let us brainstorm ways to demonstrate the value of our strategy. Exactly, she replied. If we can frame our proposal around the measurable outcomes while staying true to our creative vision, we can make it undeniable. It's about shifting the narrative in our favor. As they delved into their work, ideas began to flow. They crafted compelling visuals and outlined articulations that showcased their strategy's potential impact on revenue. The synergy between them sparked a warm current of inspiration, propelling Jonathan beyond mere self-preservation and towards something more profound, his evolving self as a leader. In the days that followed, Jonathan felt a transformation simmering beneath the surface. However, with every step toward fortifying their project, he remained acutely aware of Evelyn's potential interference. He began to observe her closely, gathering insight into her tactics and motivations. Each time they crossed paths, he noted the subtle cues her interactions with others, the slight dismissive gestures, the pointed remarks designed to undermine. One afternoon, he conducted an informal meeting with several team members, hoping to tap into the collective energy that had coalesced after the presentation. As they exchanged thoughts about project execution, Jonathan skillfully guided the conversation, encouraging even the shyest in the group to share their perspectives. He reveled in the rich dialogue, relishing the fact that collaboration felt natural and fruitful. And yet, like a haunting specter, Evelyn's doubts shadowed them. When she observed their excitement during a presentation to a different department, she interjected, "Are we really just chasing a whimsical idea here? This isn't art, this is business." Her voice echoed like a gunshot in the room, disrupting Jonathan's moment. But instead of recoiling under her sharp words, he summoned the strength that had been brewing within him. "Evelyn, I appreciate your concern. Critical thinking is essential in business, and that's why we want your insights while balancing creativity with profitability. Let us look at how this initiative aligns with our revenue goals." Some colleagues nodded, startled by Jonathan's composed response, while others exchanged glances. For the first time, he felt allies rallying around a shared vision, solidifying their stance despite Evelyn's chilling disapproval. However, even as he found his leadership voice, doubts still lingered. The interplay of fear and courage magnified his every action, pushing him closer to a crossroads. Could he truly transform the office culture and challenge established norms? Later that evening, as he and Sarah reviewed their feedback from the presentation, Jonathan felt a rush of determination, mixed with anxiety. What if we collapse under pressure? He asked, the weight of expectation pressing down on him. We adapt, Sarah replied. Look at how far we've come. It's this very challenge that transforms us. This isn't merely about Evelyn anymore. It's about our convictions and the authenticity we bring to our roles. Remember, growth often emerges from discomfort. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jonathan felt a surge of clarity. Discomfort was a necessary catalyst for the metamorphosis he sought not just personally, but within his entire team. Yet, looming on the horizon remained the specter of Evelyn, an unresolved challenge that could spur them forward or threaten to unravel everything they built as they wrapped up for the evening. A foreboding question gnawed at Jonathan, a sense of impending confrontation. He understood that this struggle wasn't just a matter of project success or teamwork. It was about revealing his emerging identity as a leader willing to stand against the tide of opposition. The moment of truth might be upon him that he stole one last glance at their annotated presentation, rage against the ideological constraints burning in his chest. The time was coming to confront Evelyn. Jonathan felt both exhilarated and terrified at the prospect of what awaited him. As he turned off the lights and prepared for bed, he could sense that the battle, no matter the outcome, might reshape everything he believed about himself and leadership. What if not all risks were to be feared? What if some were meant to be embraced? The morning sun streamed through Jonathan's apartment window, illuminating a path of warmth that contrasted sharply with the turmoil swirling in his mind. He rose early, tension coiling around him like a python, squeezing out both doubt and excitement. Today was the day he would face Evelyn directly, to reignite the flame of collaboration and assert his newfound leadership style. He dressed deliberately, choosing a navy blue blazer that aligned with his belief in professionalism while still feeling approachable. As he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror, he wondered, who was this man embodying both vulnerability and strength? He barely recognized the version of himself staring back, a medley of ambition and self-awareness emerging from the shadows of his insecurities. The office buzzed with its usual frenetic energy, a mix of anticipation and unease as the team prepared for the pivotal meeting with Evelyn. With every step he took down the hallway, Jonathan felt the weight of his breathing shift, heavy but purposeful. He couldn't ignore the adrenaline pooling in his palms, fueling his resolve to foster an environment thriving on innovation rather than feared. At the meeting table, his colleagues arrived, exchanging anxious glances while he took a deep breath to center himself. "Okay, team," he began, his voice steady and clear. "Today's meeting is about more than just our project. It's about our power to influence change within our department, to create a space where every voice matters." He could see their eyes flicker with intrigue, some leaning forward, ready to latch onto his words. As he spoke about the creative vision they had developed, framed by metrics that aligned directly with the company's goals, a sense of unity enveloped the room. The barrier between leadership and collaboration began to dissolve, revealing a landscape ripe for engagement and innovation. Yet, Jonathan's anticipation of Evelyn's entrance loomed heavy over his thoughts. Just as he was starting to believe they could weather any storm, Evelyn strode in, her presence emanating a commanding energy that silenced the buzzing conversations. Her eyes, sharp and analytical, scanned the room, taking note of the palpable enthusiasm that had sparked among Jonathan's team. "Interesting," she said, folding her arms as she leaned against the doorway. "You all seem quite enamored with this project." Her tone dripped with skepticism, an immediate challenge to Jonathan's authority. Jonathan felt a moment of uncertainty creeping in, the familiar staleness of his old fears resurfacing. He could almost hear the echoes of doubt urging him to shrink back, but instead, he dug deep. "Evelyn, we do see the potential?" She cut him off, eyes narrowing. "You mean theoretical ideas that lack any robust grounding in the reality of our business goals?" A sharp, gasping breath from a colleague punctuated the silence. The energy in the room shifted. Tension tightened as they diverted their attention to Jonathan. It was time to confront, to show what he had learned about leadership. Turning to face her, he felt the wellspring of courage rise. "Yes, potential," he replied firmly, his heart racing as he continued. "But with the groundwork we've laid, we also have a solid transformation strategy that can pivot us toward measurable outcomes. It's essential to embrace creativity as part of our business DNA, not stifle it." Evelyn arched an eyebrow, almost taken aback. "Name one successful company that thrives on whimsy and unpredictability over proven strategies." "That's exactly where we differ in our approach," he challenged, allowing confidence to steady his voice. "It's not about whimsy, it's about innovation. Companies that adapt, like those in tech, leverage creativity to propel growth. We can become that kind of leader, but we must be open to change and each other." For the first time, he noticed subtle shifts in Evelyn's expressions. Was it surprise? Curiosity? He glanced at his colleagues, their expressions transitioning from apprehension to intrigue. Jonathan could see it, the seed of possibility igniting in their eyes. A collective breath shifting in the atmosphere. As the discussion continued, Jonathan felt a new strength coursing through him. With every articulate response, every challenge he issued, the essence of his leadership crystallized, firm yet collaborative, decisive yet open. He saw opportunities now threading through his relationships with teammates, creating a richer narrative that honored everyone's contributions. But just as he began to feel the tide turning in his favor, a disconcerting thought snaked through his mind like an ice-cold chill. Was he merely energy in motion, or was he underestimating the cunning of Evelyn? There was a force behind her sharp words that went beyond mere skepticism. It was a test, a reminder that the playing field could shift at any moment. As the meeting wrapped up and the team scattered into a flurry of discussions, Jonathan stood momentarily at the threshold, feeling the weight of his evolving identity in every pulse of the office around him. He had discovered new strength, yet now the question loomed larger than before. Was this a turning point, or an opening salvo leading to a battle of wits with Evelyn that might define his role in shaping the future of the culture he envisioned? The moment of truth awaited him, just beyond the next conference room door. Jonathan paced the empty conference room, the remnants of the meeting still echoing in his mind. He clutched a sleek tablet, feeling its cool surface as he attempted to ground himself in the aftermath of the confrontation. The energy surge he'd felt during the discussion waned, replaced by a nagging anxiety about his next steps. The stakes had been raised, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to navigate the complex dynamics of leadership in the shadow of Evelyn's formidable presence. In the quiet of the room, he replayed their exchange, analyzing every word, every nuance. Was there a way to turn her skepticism into an ally? He had no intention of dismantling her authority. He wanted to build a foundation based on mutual respect. Jonathan jotted down thoughts, framing them in a way that could either appease or challenge Evelyn, depending on her reaction to his next move. The tapestry of ideas in his mind sparked a realization. Setting aside pride and defensiveness could lead to unexpected opportunities. The idea of collaboration with Evelyn began to take root. If he could demonstrate that her insights, though often harshly delivered, were valued, he might find a way to channel her energy into a constructive partnership. It was a gamble, one that could either fortify his leadership or unearth new vulnerabilities. There was no denying her influence. He witnessed the fear she instilled in others and the way it governed their behaviors. But Jonathan refused to let that constraint define him or the team he expected to elevate. Jonathan's phone buzzed, jolting him from his thoughts. It was a message from Clara, one of his colleagues, expressing enthusiasm about the possibilities they discussed in the meeting. "Why not set up a lunch with Evelyn?" she suggested. "Show her you're willing to engage outside of the boardroom. It might lead to a breakthrough." The notion reverberated through him, a surge of energy pouring into his mind. Lunch with Evelyn. It would need to be strategic, an opportunity to create an environment where the walls between them could come down. He envisioned a relaxed setting, perhaps a local cafe with outdoor seating, where the informal atmosphere could encourage an open dialogue. Jonathan quickly crafted a message, proposing a lunch meeting and suggesting a few locations. Days spiraled into weeks, filled with back-to-back meetings and unexpected deadlines. But Jonathan persisted in preparing for his upcoming lunch with Evelyn. He researched not just her professional history, but also her interests, hoping to find common ground they could both speak upon. The stakes felt high with each passing day, yet he couldn't ignore the thrill of seizing the opportunity for personal growth. Lunch day arrived, and he dressed deliberately again, opting for something slightly less formal but still polished. The cafe bustled with life as he arrived early, hands clammy with anticipation, but the atmosphere offered an antidote to his nerves. The sun cast warm patterns on the table, and the scent of fresh coffee filled the space. As he waited, Jonathan reflected on what he wanted to convey. He knew he had to approach Evelyn with both confidence and openness, ready to embrace confrontation, but also to listen deeply. Minutes ticked by, and when she arrived, her posture exuded the command he had grown accustomed to. Yet, there was an openness to her expression that hadn't been there before. Perhaps, he mused, there was balance to be found. "Jonathan," she greeted, her eyes assessing him as she settled into the chair across from him. He felt the weight of her scrutiny, but also something more, a flicker of curiosity. Thanks for meeting with me, Evelyn. I know we have different perspectives, and I value your expertise. I wanted to see if we could explore how to use our differences to strengthen the team. Her lips curled into a slight smirk, the corner of her mouth dancing as if caught between skepticism and intrigue. Her silence was pregnant with potential. Jonathan could sense this interaction could either ignite collaboration or reaffirm the divide. The moment stretched between them, tangible and electric. He had opened a door, and the question hung in the air. Would she step through? As she leaned in slightly, Jonathan braced for a response that could sway the future of their working relationship. The moment of truth was unfurling right before him. Did he have the skills to navigate this pivotal moment? Or would he find himself folding under the weight of her formidable presence? Only time would reveal whether this was a step towards unity or merely a prelude to another confrontation. Evelyn's gaze bore into Jonathan, a moment of silence stretching uncomfortably between them. He held his breath, wondering if he had miscalculated. Would his attempt to frame their competition as a collaborative effort be met with contempt? The air crackled with tension, and the cafe's lively background faded into a distant hum. I appreciate your candor, Jonathan, she finally responded, her tone betraying a hint of curiosity. But you need to understand, it's not just about our perspectives. It's about the results they deliver. Her voice, while cool, carried an edge that reminded him of her authority. Jonathan nodded, swallowing a lump of apprehension. I completely agree. Results are paramount. I think by combining our approaches, we can not only achieve but exceed those results. A flicker of something interest, perhaps, shifted in her expression. You think I'll collaborate with someone I've often found lacking? He couldn't falter now, despite the self-doubt creeping back in. It's not about who's lacking. It's about what we can build together. The challenge in her eyes spurred his resolve. He would not back down. Evelyn's smirk returned, but softened into a contemplative expression. Was it a shred of respect he glimpsed? All right, let us put it to the test. Tell me your vision for the team moving forward. With each word he articulated, Jonathan felt a weight lift from his shoulders, clarity washing over him. This was the moment he prepared for the chance to share his perspective without restriction. What I envision is a team that leverages our distinct abilities. By fostering an environment that prioritizes transparency, we can test ideas openly. How ambitious! Her tone danced between skepticism and intrigue, the challenge amplifying the pulse of her interest. But ideas are only as good as the execution behind them. Execution is vital, he countered, leaning in, but being open to feedback could refine our strategies and ignite innovation. Your strength lies in your critical. I imagine how it could elevate our projects by holding them to a higher standard. Evelyn's brow furrowed slightly in thought. He pressed on, seeing a crack in her armor, a chance to propose a guideline for collaboration. If we can create a regular forum to share progress and obstacles, it could reduce friction and enhance trust among the team. With a slight nod, she considered the idea. And how would you ensure that everyone remains accountable? It takes discipline. Accountability starts with leadership, he asserted. If we lead by example, showing our willingness to receive critiques, others will follow suit. It cultivates an atmosphere of ownership and motivates results. The tension in her shoulders lessened. He could see the internal conflict shift. She was weighing his proposal, and for the first time, Jonathan sensed the potential for a new dynamic taking shape if he could keep it moving forward. Evelyn sat back, folding her arms skeptically. I want to work with someone who doesn't deliver. Neither will I, he replied, echoing her tone but softening the edges. Let us hold each other to a standard then. A partnership predicated on mutual accountability. For a moment, a spark of something, maybe admiration, illuminated her features. The prospect of working together on common ground was suddenly more enticing. As their conversation continued, Jonathan felt a rush of adrenaline. This was not just a lunch meeting. It was a pivotal moment in his career. The depths of his leadership potential were unfolding, stretching beyond his original plans. Yet, doubt lingered, murky and persistent. Would this newfound collaboration lead to the results he envisioned, or would the very tensions that brought them together also tear them apart? Jonathan's stomach churned with both excitement and anxiety, the stakes higher than before. As their lunch drew to a close, He realized that the true challenge lay ahead not just with Evelyn, but within himself. "How do we take this forward, Jonathan?" she asked as they wrapped up. The urgency of her inquiry echoed in the space between them. He met her gaze, the fire of determination igniting once more. "We start immediately. Let us schedule our first forum and build our accountability structure. No more delays." Evelyn leaned back in her chair, assessing him once again. "You're either going to surprise me, or I'm going to enjoy watching you fail." The challenge hung heavy in the air as he returned her gaze with unwavering resolve. Jonathan sensed a new depth was rising within him, a duality of hope and anxiety, as he prepared to unveil his capabilities against the backdrop of potential disappointment. Only then did he realize the real journey was just beginning. What lay beneath the surface of this partnership could either forge his path to success or unravel his very essence. What was he truly willing to risk to rise above his self-imposed limitations? Jonathan felt the weight of Evelyn's scrutiny long after their meeting had concluded. As he exited the cafe, the world outside felt different, charged with possibilities that were both exhilarating and daunting. He had taken a step beyond the familiar confines of his routine, and that gamble had the potential to redefine his professional landscape. Yet, unease churned in his stomach. What if his newfound approach faltered under the pressure? Back at his desk, Jonathan meticulously reviewed the notes he had jotted down during their conversation. They outlined his vision for the team, measured against the performance metrics he'd spent hours analyzing. He could sense that Evelyn's challenge had unlocked something dormant within him, an eagerness to not just lead, but to inspire a cohesive unit. He recalled her skepticism, mingled with curiosity, a potent combination he could exploit. He crafted an email to schedule the first accountability forum. He felt a surge of resolve. Gone were the days of hiding behind the shadows, fearing judgment. He would demonstrate his commitment to transparency and discipline. But the quiet voice of self-doubt lingered. Could he live up to his own standards? In the following days, Jonathan implemented small changes to how he interacted with his colleagues. He began to solicit feedback rather than simply presenting his ideas. He initiated informal gatherings where team members could voice their opinions, creating an unexpected ripple of engagement. The energy in the office shifted, discussions grew livelier, and acceptance of critique became a valued part of their work culture. Yet, he was acutely aware that one misstep could lead back to isolation. Meeting with Evelyn again felt like an impending storm. Their first accountability forum was set for Friday, and as the week progressed, Jonathan pored over his strategies. He urged himself to maintain a clear focus, knowing that demonstrating results both personally and within the team was essential. Acceptance and accountability were the cornerstones he was trying to establish, but he feared the inevitable clash of egos. Friday arrived, draped in tension. The meeting room bore a palpable stillness as team members filed in, their expressions varying from eager anticipation to lingering skepticism. Jonathan exhaled heavily, reminding himself that this was his moment to confront his fears. He took his place at the head of the table, reviewing the agenda one last time before speaking. "Thank you all for being here," he started, his voice steady but a flutter in his chest betrayed the butterflies swirling within. "Today isn't just about accountability engage, it's about building trust and pushing ourselves collectively to reach new heights. We're committed, as a team, to holding each other accountable." He glanced at Evelyn, whose inscrutable expression heightened the pressure that pooled within him. Would she stand by his side, or would she be the critique that shattered his resolve? As the meeting unfolded, Jonathan navigated through ideas and feedback with surprising ease. The initial tension began to dissolve as participatory energy surged across the table. Although he felt the strain of ongoing self-examination, he focused on the shared exchanges, cultivating an atmosphere charged with courage. However, as ideas flowed, a challenge emerged. One of his colleagues raised a brilliant, yet conflicting proposal. Jonathan's heart raced as he struggled with the urge to defend his agenda, suddenly torn between collaboration and conviction. How would he navigate this potential minefield? Would conceding to a diverging idea from someone he deemed inexperienced ruin the carefully crafted structure he had just established? Jonathan was faced with a critical decision. Uphold his authority or embrace the challenges of collaborative innovation. The tension in the room thickened as all eyes turned towards him, waiting for a response. The reality of this moment struck him. This was his opportunity not just to lead, but to demonstrate true professional integrity. He took a breath and acknowledged the idea in front of him. That perspective adds invaluable depth to our strategy. He began tentatively, surprised by the confidence in his tone. Let us explore how we can integrate that into our plan. Evelyn's raised eyebrow hinted at her approval, if only slightly, but it was something. He realized then that yielding to the strengths of others didn't diminish his capabilities. Instead, it enhanced them. This realization, exhilarating yet intimidating, marked a significant shift for Jonathan. He was evolving in ways he hadn't anticipated, stepping into leadership that galvanized his team rather than isolating himself. Yet, just as the discussion spiraled into greater collaboration, Evelyn interrupted with an unexpected and pointed inquiry. So, Jonathan, are you ready to embrace all aspects of leadership, even when they challenge the foundational beliefs you thought were ironclad? Her question hung in the air, urging him to question everything he believed about himself. Jonathan could feel the sharp edges of vulnerability beckoning him, provoking thoughts of his past fears and uncertainties. Would he have the strength to face it all, or would he stumble? Inside, Jonathan churned with anticipation and dread. What lay ahead would truly test the core of his professional evolution. Jonathan stood before the mirror in his office, examining the unfamiliar reflection he now recognized. He had walked a path from arrogance to understanding, from isolation to connection. The lunchtime gambit with Evelyn had set into motion a profound transformation he could hardly have predicted. He knew that today's accountability forum would be pivotal, not just for his team, but for himself, an intersection of authentic leadership that demanded courage. As his colleagues gathered around the conference table, Jonathan's heart raced with mingled excitement and apprehension. The stakes felt monumental, and he understood that this was more than just a meeting. It was an opportunity to redefine leadership, forging a culture that thrived on collaboration and trust rather than competition. Thank you all for being here today, Jonathan began, projecting a steadiness he didn't entirely feel. This isn't merely about holding each other accountable. It's about fostering an environment of innovation. Together, we can cultivate growth through transparency. He glanced at Evelyn, who sat thoughtfully at the far end of the table. Her presence still intimidated him, her sharp gaze a reminder of every challenge he faced within himself. But today felt different. Today, he was not retreating into himself. He was embracing the whole of his newfound self. Jonathan invited feedback on the projects they had discussed. Encourage participation, he reminded himself. He encouraged each team member to voice opinions, weaving their contributions into a fabric of collective vision. As ideas sparked and branched into discussions, he felt a thrill at how the atmosphere shifted from trepidation to enthusiasm. But then, an unexpected counterproposal surfaced, one that contradicted the direction he envisioned. A moment of tension hung in the air, and he prepared himself for the instinct to defend his previously upheld assertions. Instead, Jonathan took a deep breath, welcoming the pushback. That's an intriguing perspective, he admitted, tone measured but open. We need to explore how integrating that concept could enhance our strategy. What does everyone else think? Echoes of surprise rippled through the room. Instead of fear of standing corrected, Jonathan embraced vulnerability. Here, insight was more valuable than maintaining singular authority. A casual glance to Evelyn revealed a glint of something akin to respect. Did she recognize his evolution? As they navigated through the ideas, Jonathan felt a warmth grow within him, not just an acknowledgement of his own growth, but the cohesion forming among the team. Trust was blossoming, and he was energizing everyone's strengths. Then, as the enthusiasm peaked, Evelyn chimed in, her sharp line of questioning cutting through the palpable excitement. Jonathan, this is great, but can you uphold this openness in the face of criticism, especially criticism over ideas you're personally attached to? He felt that familiar tension rise. The question struck deep, probing the heart of leadership and all it required. Could he truly maintain this path of vulnerability amidst the inevitable challenges that came with it? He took a breath, the room hanging on his response. I embrace that challenge, Evelyn, he responded, confidence steadying his voice. Growth comes from facing discomfort, and I'm committed to fostering an environment where every idea can be explored regardless of my attachments. I want us all to feel empowered. The unexpected applause from several colleagues filled the space, reverberating in Jonathan's chest. His acknowledgement of their collective voice had sparked something vibrant. Their momentum surged as he felt their composition shift from hesitancy to unity. No longer commanding from above, he had woven them into a partnership in that transformative moment. Jonathan felt solid confidence rooted in genuine competence. He was no longer a solitary figure walking a rigid path of success. He had established his position through collaboration and shared belief. As the forum concluded and the team began to disperse, Jonathan looked at Evelyn directly, her expression now softened by a hint of pride. Well done today. You managed to balance authority and openness, something I didn't think was possible, she remarked, the challenge in her tone now replaced with gratitude. Thanks, Evelyn, Jonathan replied, the weight of their exchanges lifting. It's about recognizing the value each of us can bring. I hope we can build on this moving forward. Walking out of the conference room, Jonathan's resolve solidified. He had proven to himself that transformation was not merely a matter of personal success, but a shared journey. He had conquered his fear of vulnerability, embraced collaboration, and established a culture rooted in support and accountability. Jonathan's gaze drifted to Sarah, who had quietly observed the morning discussions. Today was not just a personal victory. Together they had achieved something remarkable in evolution of the workplace that promised to enable untold growth. Hey, Sarah, he said, nodding in her direction. Let us debrief. We've got a lot of momentum, and I want to explore how we capitalize on today's success. In that moment, Jonathan felt a surge of pride for what he had accomplished not just professionally, but personally. The barriers he once confided in had come down. This was his achievement, a culmination of individual transformation that paved the way for collective triumph. Jonathan understood now that genuine leadership was about unveiling others through mutual recognition, and he was eager to see how far they could all go together. Now, this is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now to our channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like and feed the algorithm. Your support makes all the difference. Comment below your reactions and theories about this transformative journey. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion.